What were the dumbest lies you believed when you were a kid? I lost my stuffed animal, a white dog, in the airport in Miami when I was 5. It was my favorite, and I was really sad about it. A few weeks later, my mom presented me with a brown dog that otherwise looked exactly like the white one I had lost. She said that the workers at the airport had found it and mailed it to us, but he got a tan because he was in Florida. Bought it hook, line, and sinker for a few years. Tan dog is now my son's, and he's a big fan. I could not understand how all the death scenes in war movies seemed so realistic, so I asked one of my older brothers how they did it. He proceeded to tell me that they empty out state prisons in the area that the movie is being made, dress them up and give them guns and tell them that if they survived the filming, then they'd get to leave jail after. I was told that at around 7, and I believed it until I was around 10. That cork-sized security cameras covered our entire house, and that my parents could see my every move. My kid has convinced herself of the same thing, and always randomly asks, "What am I doing right now?" from across the house. My mom convinced us she had eyes in the back of her head. She could tell us what we were doing in the living room while working in the kitchen facing away from us. We test it even further by doing the "how many fingers am I holding up" test, and she'd get it right every time. So all little kid evidence concluded that mom did in fact have eyes in the back of her head. It wasn't until I was much older that I randomly noticed the crystal clear reflection in the kitchen window my mom could always see. As a kid, I had a strangulated hernia, which left me with one testicle. My dad told me if I ever had kids, they would all be boys or all girls, because each testicle is for each sex. Believed it for years. My sister told me that if you count all the stones of Stonehenge, you will die. I still don't know how many stones there are in Stonehenge. That women's periods stop in water to avoid sharks smelling it. My older brother pranked me once. I had watched a kids' TV show, I think it was The Electric Company, that featured a guest star who was a tap dancer. My brother convinced me that tap dancers made their tapping sounds not with their feet but with their mouths. I spent the next several weeks trying to tap dance with my mouth noises before my mom made me quit. That the draining sound of the water in the bathtub was a monster that would suck you in as well, a lie made to get me out of the bath. When I was a kid, I asked my dad if reading enough books could really give you telekinesis, like Matilda. He said yes. I spent many years after that thinking I just wasn't doing enough. When I was a little fellow, my parents used to tell me that when you smoke, you'll die instantaneously. Unfortunately, they forgot this at a campfire organized by our former neighborhood and smoked a cig. I remember I was desperately trying to stop them and cried all the time because I thought that they were going to both die. If you swallowed the black watermelon seeds, a watermelon would grow in your belly. That the hazard button in a car would blow the car up. My grandmother told me that pinching gave me cancer. I got pinched once at recess and yelled at the person because I thought they were going to give me cancer. The button on your armrest on planes is the eject button. I found out it reclines your seat embarrassingly late. When I was a kid, my dad always told me not to touch it because it was an emergency button. One time when I was like 5, we were flying to visit family and he fell asleep. So I pressed it a bunch because I was curious. Nothing happened and I fell asleep thinking it must be broken. I woke up in a stroller with my parents upset because the plane had to make an emergency landing and I started crying because I thought it was my fault. When I was a kid, my dad told me it cost 25 cents to change the radio station to keep me from messing with the radio in his car. I believed that until I was 14. I once thought academic scholarships were only given to dumb students so that some of them could still attend college. I even told my older brother that he was so stupid he had to get scholarships to go to college. He went to Ivy League. I was in on this lie between my mom and younger sister. My sister was about 5 at the time, and my mom convinced her that Benadryl was a truth serum. My mom would threaten to give it to my sister if she knew she was lying. It was so hilarious, but my sister seriously believed it and would get upset. This isn't a lie, but when I was a kid, I had no idea how turn signals worked and just thought the cars always knew exactly where we were going. I didn't realize they turned off automatically when the steering wheel is turned back straight. I just thought all adults had to be really coordinated to disengage them while executing the turn. This made me really nervous about learning how to drive. One time, I was at my dad's, parents separated, and he and a friend were hanging outside sipping beers and smoking cigarettes while I was decapitating dandelions with my plastic ninja sword. My dad never let me have soda when I was a kid. His friend left and my dad went inside to do the dishes. I saw a can of 7-Up on the deck and sprinted towards it and took a huge swig. Turns out they had been ashing and putting their cig butts in there. I run inside and throw up and my dad goes, "What happened?" I lied and said nothing, but he figured it out. So he told me all sodas that he buys taste like that, even if they are unopened. I believed him for a few years until I was like 9. That you could get a ticket for having the light on in your car while driving. My parents convinced us that the person knocking on our door on weekend nights when we were asleep was our Uncle Shiloh stopping to say hello. We don't have an Uncle Shiloh. He was the pizza guy. I was 7 years old. One of my teachers wanted us to write a letter to a family member or friend or someone. I wrote the letter, got the envelope, got the stamp, and my mom had worked at the county jail at the time, and she suggested that I write one of the inmates who never got mail. So I did. I wrote something along the lines of, "I'm sorry you're arrested, but I hope you get out." I even signed it with my 7-year-old signature. While I was writing the letter, my mom left to get to the store. I asked my older brother what our address was because I needed to put a return address. He said 1600 Pennsylvania Ave, Washington, D.C. 20500. For those that don't know, that's the address to the White House. I wrote it on the letter and put it in with the mail that my mom was sending out. Mind you, I grew up in Michigan and never left the state. But I wasn't smart. Years later, I went to pick my mom up from work, and one of the COs called me Mr. President. I asked why he said that, and he mentioned the letter that I had written years prior and how it was a joke in jail every time my mom mentioned me. This is one of the funniest stories I have ever read in my life. I'm just imagining some random inmate opening a letter in shaky 7-year-old kid writing, "I'm sorry you're arrested, but I hope you get out." He looks at the envelope and it's from the White House, and he spends several days wondering who the hell wrote that. You made me cry with laughter. That adults know what they're doing. When I was 6, my parents told me that when you flush from an airplane toilet, the waste gets dumped mid-air into the ocean. I believed that and told all my friends. My parents then told me they were joking and I became the class fool. See, I thought that as a kid, not because anyone told me, but in my child's mind it made sense. As a result, I was terrified to use a plane bathroom. In the late 90s, I was on a plane with my mom and I needed to go, but refused. The stewardess said that if I went, I could sit with the pilot for the rest of the flight. I still refused. Now I'm kicking myself because that's a chance I'd never get again. That if you sit too close to the TV or computer screen, you'll go blind. I was told that during the summer of 5th grade, then got glasses in 6th grade. All I heard was a "told you" as I tried on my first pair of glasses and was told that my sister, who was 1 year younger, won't need glasses because she listened. She got her glasses less than a year later. That ATMs give free money. I wanted to get a credit card so I didn't have to pay for things. I was told by my dad when I was around 8 or 9 that the people at the sewage plant have been examining your poop and you need to eat more fiber. My mom told me my birthmark was a coffee stain from when she accidentally spilled coffee on me as a baby. I believed it until I was like 11. That swallowed gum stays in your body for 7 years. I swallowed gum and thought that was the reason I was fat. My mom rented A Never-Ending Story, and Dad told me that if I tried to watch it, I'd have to sit there forever because it never ended. I remember being thankful for my dad's warning and wondering why Mom would do that to me. You know how Barbie feet are on tippy toes, so they are shaped to fit into a high heel shoe? Well, when I was a kid, I thought that when girls grew up into women, that their feet would be shaped like that, despite the fact that I lived in a house with 4 grown women and none of whom had Barbie feet. When I was a child, I got upset after a button came off my shirt. My mother told me not to worry and that if I placed the button under a rock in the yard, the button fairy would replace it with a quarter. I believed it, and to my mother's dismay, she discovered I had pulled the buttons off of every shirt in my closet. To this day, 40 years later, shirt buttons can still be found under random rocks in my parents' backyard. That if you die in your dream, you die in real life. I 100% believed that if I left a pile of rocks under this tree outside of my house, a fairy would come visit me. My parents told me that so that I would go play outside. If you twist your belly button, your butt will fall off. The rumble stripes on the side of the road are there to help people who are blind drivers. I confidently told kids in my class that one year, and they believed me. The teachers in my school told us that if we pull the fire alarm, ink shoots out on your hands that doesn't wash off for a few days, so they know who pulled it. I was 26 when I found out it was all a lie. My friend Kyle and I dared each other to pull it with work gloves. The whole damn thing came off the wall unconnected to any wires or anything, just glued on. Ah, schools on military bases. My mom told me while I was helping mix some batter or something that if I changed from mixing clockwise to counterclockwise, the ingredients would be unmixed. I believed this for way too long and still only mix clockwise. You can't leave the house after dark because the chupacabra outside will eat you. You won't get in trouble if you tell the truth. My dad at least offered the, you'll get in less trouble if you tell me the truth. Dad told us his dried apricots were monkey ears so that we wouldn't eat them. That my father wrote The Count of Monte Cristo. He had started the book and loved it so much that he would read a part and then recite it to me as if he was the one who had come up with it. When he reached the point that he was in at the book, he would say, "To be continued," while I whined for the rest. This lasted a week and a half. That I was special and somehow above others. That leprechauns were real, and I spent many hours and several iterations designing traps to try and catch one, because if you caught one, you could get his pot of gold. A few times I tried, and I got a piece of gold, and that's what kept the magic going. Turns out my dad was painting rocks with gold paint and sneaking them into my traps at night. It was actually a really sweet memory as a kid, but it fell apart when I started asking other kids how their traps were going and no one knew what I was talking about. I'm black and my dad is a very, very light-skinned man, like to the point where he's actually pale. When I was probably about 5 or so, I asked why he was so much brighter than my mom, and he told me a bucket of white paint fell on him one day and that's how it happened. He also had me convinced that my older sister went into a hat every day, so I'd peer into a beanie trying to find her when I wanted to play. She was at school. I was probably like 3 when I thought she was hanging out inside of a hat for a few hours every day. My kindergarten best friend also convinced me she used to hang out with dinosaurs and rode around on them like a horse. And another friend in 1st grade convinced me she had short hair because it retracted into her head every day because of the sun. Those are probably the most absurd lies I can remember, but I'm sure there are a million more because I was a ridiculously gullible kid. When my sister and I were kids, our mom lied and told us that she was a Grammy-nominated and winning singer. She said that all of her trophies were in our attic, knowing that neither of us would ever go in and check for them. My sister and I bragged to all of our friends about it for years, only to discover that our mom isn't a very good singer at all. We've held this lie over her head for nearly 20 years now, so this past Christmas we gifted her with a fake Grammy that has her name engraved and her favorite music category, citing her as the winner of it. She laughed until she cried. Sometimes when we asked for McDonald's, my dad would say no but turn in anyway and say that the car was doing it by itself. I believed him every time and thought that the car was just my homie. I asked my mom where babies came from. She told me a policeman goes inside the woman's belly and just pulls it out. I'll be bloody rich when I grow up. That everybody gets a house once they hit 18 or have a kid, whichever happens first. It wasn't a lie that I was told, just something I believed was true, which nobody tried to correct me. My dad told me that the reason why police officers spend so much time at donut shops is because the shop owners actually need them there to shoot the holes through the pastries to provide them with the classic donut shape. I found out this was a lie when my dad caught me trying to get behind the counter at Dunkin' Donuts one time because I wanted to see the shooting. You can be whatever you want when you grow up. Probably that if someone couldn't see me, then I couldn't see them. It led me to run around with my eyes closed and inevitably break my arm. My dad told me he didn't have a middle name because his parents couldn't afford one. I believed this for a shockingly long time. I had no reason to doubt him, and I knew his family was poor. I believed that my mom was much younger than she really was. I have 3 that were really dumb. My older brother told me that if you put your Pokemon cards in the microwave, then they become real. I started a fire doing this and ruined cards that would now be worth lots of money. 2. My older brother told me that aliens lived in my shoes. I had the ones that would glow up when you walk. I got scared and never wore them again. 3. My older brother told me that if I wrote down a wish on a kite and flew it up high enough, the ink on the kite would disappear and my wish would come true. I spent hours trying to make this happen. On my 5th birthday, my older sister gave me a pack of gum. It was my first time trying gum, and I swallowed it. I told my sister, and she told me that because I swallowed the gum, I would die in 7 years. I was so sad. I never told my mom because I didn't want to make her sad. So I lived the next 7 years of my life awaiting my death. My mom couldn't understand what my problem was on my 12th birthday. I was just sad. Finally, before bed, I told her how much I loved her and that I hoped that she would miss me. She said, "What are you talking about?" I told her that I was going to die before she woke up. My sister got yelled at and my mom assured me that I would not die before the morning. So yeah, I thought I was dying for 7 years. I believed the crust of the bread had all the vitamins and the center parts were empty calories. My older sister told me that brown cows made chocolate milk, and I believed that for years. She also told me that if you ran over the cord of the vacuum cleaner, it would electrocute you and you'd die. I think this is why I hate vacuum. The ice cream van played music to let everyone know he was out of ice cream. I was hiking with my family once when I was about 8 or 9. We were walking along a river when my dad picked up a rock and said, "You know, in the center of every stone there's a tiny drop of water, and if you squeeze hard enough you can get it to come out." The guy had me literally trying to squeeze water from a stone the entire hike back to the car. We didn't have air conditioning or central air in my home growing up, so we used box fans a lot. They sit on the floor and aren't all that sturdy, so sometimes they would fall over or get knocked over. At one point, my mom told me not to leave them running when they fell over because they would blow up, meaning that the motor would burn out, I assume. My childhood mind, of course, took blow up to mean the same as it does in movies, and imagined our whole house exploding in a massive fireball. I remember one time a fan fell over next to my dad, and he wasn't urgently picking it up. I went into a panic and was yelling at him while he gave me a "What the hell is your problem?" look. That pro wrestling was real. I once asked my older cousins when I was about 7 or 8 if they also hated the burning aftertaste when you swallow toothpaste. My cousin looked at me and said, "Don't swallow toothpaste. You only have like 3 chances. After that, you've had too much chemicals and you die when you turn 21. I looked on in horror and said, "But I've accidentally swallowed toothpaste heaps of times." They looked at me and said, "Oh gosh, I hope not. You'll probably die." So that's where my fear of death came from. I don't remember when, but several years later suddenly dawned on me that they were obviously making it up. Carrots give you better eyesight. Ugh. I believed dogs understood my words. Yes, some words they grasp, but I spoke freely to them. The moon made moon pies. Maybe not a lie, but I thought quicksand was something I was going to have to worry about in my daily life. So far, I've had 0 encounters. I never believed this, but my eyes would go square if I watched too much TV. I kind of still believe it. My nana used to tell me not to wipe off the dog's kisses because they would see it and get sad. I still have to turn my head to wipe my face so the dog doesn't see it. I'll pay you back, I promise. That money doesn't buy happiness. It's not that money buys happiness, it's that the lack of money brings misery. So do I really need to bring up the Marilyn Manson rib thing, or can we all just agree we believed that? Remembering mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell is important. Not anything I was taught, but when I was a kid I'd see old black and white footage and think that people back then also saw in black and white, because how could people see color if the color film hadn't been invented yet? That canker sores, or ulcers as we called them, came from telling lies. My dad told me that a few times, and in 3rd grade when my teacher asked if anyone knew why we got them, I raised my hand and proceeded to spat out, "My daddy said they come from telling lies." My teacher's awkward silence and lack of eye contact let me know that it was my papa who sat on a throne of lies. That the tooth fairy actually put money under your pillow after you lost a tooth. That your blood is blue until it contacts air. This wasn't a lie someone told me, but a weird conclusion I reached when I was 4 or 5. If you buy something and you don't have enough money to pay for it, the shopkeeper will give you the rest of the money so that you don't forget how much you owe. For me, that was what adults called change. It took my mom years to figure that one out. Sometimes when she gave me money to go get something, she'd comment that it had been expensive, and I'd reply, "I still brought change." She thought I was saying that because there was leftover money, while I thought I was telling her that she still owed money at the shop. There is an invisible, all-powerful being that created the universe and people, punished us for sin, and then became a person and died as a mechanism for us not to be punished for sin. Biggest lie ever, and they keep telling it. My mom got annoyed by my whistling, so she told me that whistling will call upon ghosts around you. My dad convinced me black and white movies were black and white because the world was actually all in black and white before 1960. The swim after eating lie isn't the dumbest, but it's pretty impressive how parents across the world concluded to make that lie reality. That you're supposed to undo your seatbelt when driving by a body of water so that you can get out fast if you fall in with the car. Thanks, Dad. That I would get more conservative as I got older. I'm in my 30s now, and the trend continues in the other direction. I didn't believe this myself, but I know 3 completely separate individuals who believed that islands and continents floated on the ocean, so if you got enough people on one side of the island, it would tip over like a boat. That the bad things I did at school went on my permanent record and would follow me my whole life. That there was a nude code for Mortal Kombat, or that Taco Bell's meat was comprised of sawdust. I don't think they were lying about Taco Bell. My dad got stabbed in the Civil War. I'm 29, and it turned out to just be an appendectomy scar. That America was the greatest nation on Earth. I'm not proud of it. Ancient aliens had me convinced. That God would hear my mental questions on whether God even exists and strike me dead for questioning. I was maybe 8 years old. The absurdity of that was my doorway to agnostic atheism. My mom always told me growing up that if I had taken medicine for something that I'm not sick for, the medicine would cause me to get that disease. Smart on her end, made sure I didn't take random medicine, and also helped convince me to confess when I was faking sick. My dad didn't like tomatoes because he was bitten by one when he was younger. Chocolate milk comes from brown cows. I even thought that strawberry milk came from pink cows. My friend claimed he had a watch that he could push a button on and his shoes would turn into rollerblades slowly over an hour. He never showed me if it actually worked, but deep down inside I wanted to believe it did because his family was very rich. He had cool toys. Police are your friends. I was told that new Chinese parents name their newborn by dropping a spoon, and whatever noise it made, that's how they decided the baby's name. Yikes. So the lie is dumb, and I guess me for believing it. When I was petting the neighbor's cat, he once told me to be careful with the tail because that's where cats have their hearts. That drinking milk would turn me into a 6'2", 185-pound athlete. My mother told us that if you waved to airplanes as they passed, they would throw you bubblegum. We lived near a small private airfield. We were the idiots waving like goons at all of the small planes overhead for far too long. When we asked her later why she told us that, she said, "When you have kids, look at the trust and belief in their eyes and see if you'll be able to resist messing with them. Love you, Mom." If your hand is bigger than your face, then you have cancer. I only fell for that once. Ah, the joys of having a brother. My parents told me that ratatouille was an incredibly offensive term for the female genitalia, not to be used under any circumstances. Spain was in South America. When the first Xbox was coming out, my older brother told me that you could put multiple games into it and play them as one combined game, like Tony Hawk's Pro Halo Motorsport. That my childhood dog's chain was broken by lightning and she ran away. Believed it for about a decade before my brother said jokingly during an argument that my dog died, and my mother nonchalantly confirmed he was right. Wasted 10 years of birthday wishes hoping my dog would come home. When I was little, like 3 or 4 years old, every time I went to visit my grandpa, he would take me out to the garden to pick an apple from his apple tree. When I was 16, 4 years after he had passed away, we were sitting around sharing stories about him, and I said, "Hey, whatever happened to that apple tree?" My family laughed and told me it wasn't real. It was just a regular tree, and he would go tie a few apples to it with string before we went over. Looking back, it was a skinny little tree with big perfect red apples in it. That cobwebs had nothing to do with old spiderwebs and were just caused by dust clumps. Life is fair. You must go to college to get a good job. You can trust the police. Time heals all. How they convinced me to eat broccoli. That broccoli is actually just little trees. They just chop them down before they get too big and hard for us to eat. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I loved those little green trees ever since. Thanks for watching until the end. What was a dumb lie that you were told when you were a kid? Tell us about it in the comments below. Then be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you know when our next video is available. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.